Okay. So hello, everybody. Welcome to Athens UX community. I'm Panagiotis Zacharias, and I'm the organizer of this community. So I will be your host for today. Today we are going to have our meetup number 30. And I'm very glad because we have as a guest speaker Vasileios Xanthopoulos, who is a Greek colleague who is living in Denmark and working in Denmark. Actually, he's working as a lead UX designer for the Lego group. And I can make an easy assumption that the name of Lego, I think that it brings to us, to our minds, some very good memories from our childhood. Of course, we're not going to play with Lego today, unfortunately, but we're going to hear and watch and participate in the discussion with Vasileios. And I'm sure that Vasileios will share some great, insightful things about the way Lego company, which is a very big corporation, tries to establish and embed UX techniques in the structures of such a big company. So the main issue, the main umbrella for our topic today is enterprise UX. I know that you are aware that this is a quite complex, tough, but very interesting and challenging topic. And to be honest, most of the times, I think that it is quite, although it is very interesting and important, at the same time, it is quite neglected as a topic. So I think that this will be a very helpful and useful discussion that we are going to have tonight with Vasileios. Before moving on, I would love to thank especially all the newcomers, all the new members in the community. So, and I would kindly ask you to keep participating in our meetups. And you can participate not only by attending, but also by sending your comments, ideas, or proposals for speaking arrangements, if you have some. And I would love to thank Zansi Labs and the UX Prodigy for being our sponsors and supporters. Thank you very much, guys. And without any further delay, the floor to Vasileios. Vasileios, please, before starting your interesting talk, please give us some details about your path, how you started your career.
Ooh, yeah. So, how many days do you have? Well, I started, well, hello, first of all, my name is Vasileios. Don't bother with my last name, at least the non-Greek ones. And as Panagiotis said, I'm a lead UX designer at the Lego group. Actually, my path started very differently. I started studying at the TEI Lamias, which is a learning institution in well, not a very small town, but it's outside of Athens. I started studying there computer science and technology, and well, I never finished that. So I left and I went in England and I got a bachelor's degree in software engineering and then a master's degree in human-computer interaction, both of those in England. And then I returned to do my military service, and I actually end up being hired by Lego in November 2015 as a junior user experience consultant back then. So yeah, I went from software engineering to the human-computer interaction because one of the elective or the subjects that you could actually get, you could actually choose from was a usability evaluation, and that's how I fell in love with user experience, where I didn't know what user experience was back then, but it was human-computer interaction in general. So yeah, that's how I started. So now 6 years later, well, 5 years and some months, I'm a lead UX designer at the Lego Group. And as Panayotis, what we're going to be talking about today is enterprise user experience specifically. So I'm going to take you through the journey that we had to go through as to how we actually increase the user-centric maturity at scale in an organization such as Lego. Well, we very affectionately call it the UX sandwich. And let's go take a look at, well, for those of you who do not know what Lego does, so Lego makes these. This is the brick, as we call it. And of course, based on that, we have some very standard, very, very popular sets like the Millennium Falcon, the Bugatti Chiron, and this is the actual, here I am right now in the campus. We actually have the Chiron on display, which is an exact replica of a Chiron built with bricks. It's a full scale, of course, it's real size, which is really cool. But again, enterprise user experience, it has been neglected in the industry in general. I'm not going to be talking specifically about Lego. In general, in the industry, enterprise user experience is something that is seen as nice to have, not necessarily needed, which is a major mistake. And thank God, after a lot of work, we have actually managed to turn the ship for Lego. So what enterprise user experience is practically we're designing, developing, and all these solutions, software, everything for our colleagues, for internal employees, for Lego employees. So we're not doing consumer-facing work. We're doing internal systems up to and including the B2B shop that Lego has, which is customer-facing, not consumer-facing. So enterprise user experience, it is about building complex software solutions. We're talking about complex systems. We're not talking about, I don't know, applications like, I don't know, Uber, for example. We're talking about applications that span, the functionality of them could be in the amount of the functionality that Microsoft Excel has or Microsoft Word, and trying to make that into a usable solution. So it is, I think, user experience at its purest, because the very foundation of what we do is problem solving. It is not about creating engaging applications. And that's the main difference, because I get asked that question a lot. What is the difference between enterprise user experience and consumer facing? Is that we're not building software applications or solutions, anything to increase engagement. And when I'm talking about engagement, let's just talk about it. How one of the measurements for engagement is how long you're actually spending on an interface. That is not the point. The point is that we're building applications to improve productivity and efficiency for the Lego workers. That's what we do. And engagement is not something that is important in what we do. Most of the time, we just want the user to actually spend as little time as possible in the systems and then go about the regular business. That is the main difference. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But first, let me take you through the history of how we actually got to be talking about maturity at scale, et cetera, et cetera. So the year is 2015. I said I was hired in November. The 9th of November was my first day. So back then, just like most IT departments out there, or enterprise IT departments, internal IT departments, user experience in the whole industry, that was the case, and it still is in a lot of big companies. User experience was something very unknown, right? It was something that people might have heard of, but most people didn't know what it is or why it's important, et cetera, et cetera. So the executive support that we had was very limited, and that makes sense because people, okay, the executives actually wanted us to get involved, but they just didn't know what to expect and exactly what kind of value we could bring as user experience in a mainly engineering-led organization, right? So the development of all the software and solutions that we had was mainly technology driven or system driven. So whatever kind of technology we had to support the business side or systems, that's the basis of how we actually build the solutions. It wasn't user-centric back then. Of course, just like again, practically everywhere, there are silos. So one department is working on this side, the other department is working on that side. So this is what we call silos, isolated teams that do not necessarily collaborate as much as they should. So, and of course, there's not, well, with everything that I've mentioned so far, that means that we don't really have any real business requirements and certainly not end user requirements. These are not the same. And we can talk later about what the difference between the two is. So it is also another very important thing, and probably a lot of you have experienced that in your organizations or, I don't know, agencies or whatever, or however you actually work, is that there is a very one-sided relationship a lot out there in the industry. It's one of the main problems, actually. There's a million articles about that out there. That's a very one-sided relationship between IT and the business, where IT most of the time acts like an order taker and not an equal partner. Because if we had equal partnership, of course, in equal terms, then we would be able to create better products. So back then, if we are involved, it's usually extremely late in the process where practically almost all the decisions have already been made. There are a lot of commitments that have been made, and suddenly somebody who is as new as me and also a junior just jumps into the middle of everything and has to say to people, you know what, we could be going in a much better way than this if we actually do this, and that. So it was very, very difficult back then. So practically what we're mostly there for and what most people want us is one of the main myths about what user experience is, which is practically putting lipstick on a pig. We have something that is not really very good or very user-centric or very usable, but some people, the misconception that user experience is practically pixel pushing or doing UI work or something like that, which is not really what we do. So from 2015 to 2018, we have to fight a lot. And by fighting, I mean in air quotes, of course, right? Every inch we have to take in different projects and products, we have to fight every step of the way, try to change the mindset, try to get as much space as possible to try to do as much work as we can, which is, again, it makes sense based on what the context is. So at the same time, we had a couple of very good initiatives to try to improve the user-centric mindset. One was to actually do a major initiative where we actually produced Lego wide personas. We ended up with personas as to what the different types or archetypes of people, of actual Lego employees that we have around the company. And at the same time, we're actually undertaking a major mindset training for the whole of IT. And we actually managed to train 300 people in a mandatory 2-day training back then, where we actually started training people in UX mindset. So as you can tell, from 2015 to 2018, we get more executive support, of course, because we show some results. And we slowly see a slow push for UX involvement. But we have a problem. And the problem is that we miss the forest for the trees. So practically, now that people actually want our help, we're extremely happy. So we dive into actual projects that mainly back then very waterfall. And that means that the project could actually last quite long. That means the very, very limited capacity that we have. And back then we were 3 UXers for the whole of IT, right? We get caught up in projects a lot. So we're practically like horses. We just look into that one project that we're working in and we miss the trees. So that's what I mean by what I say up there is that we miss the forest for the trees. We focus on the tree, miss the forest, what's going on around us. So we're very caught up into projects. We started, and we were so happy to do that, that we didn't actually bother to come up with a mission or a vision for where we're going and what we try to achieve. And of course, if you don't have a mission or a vision, then that definitely means that you don't have a strategy for what you're doing. You're just being responsive to what the demand is, or reactive. Sorry, not responsive, reactive. So back then, what we decided to do is, and it's very, very important, so please pay attention to this one, because that's what turned the whole thing around. So what we said is, okay, wait a minute, we need to step back, which is a very good also leadership principle. When you get too close to something, just step back. Try to step back so you can see what is going on around you. So what we said is that we called it the UX Reboot. And we said, okay, we're going to clear out our calendars for 3 weeks. That was a major thing because we had so much to do. But thankfully, we had a very good manager who said, yes, I will support you. And if anybody has an issue with that, they can come to me and I'll take that discussion with them. But you do what you need to do. So we cleared completely our calendars for 3 weeks in order to sit down inside our team and see, okay, what do we need to do? How do we move forward? So one of the most important questions that is very often overlooked, especially when we go in and do UX research in the beginning, or somebody tells us, okay, by the way, we want you to help into the design that product or something, is the first thing we need to know is what do we want to achieve? That is something that it's very often overlooked in UX research in general, right? If we don't know where we're going, we don't know how to get there. Or as they say, if you don't know where you're going, every road will get you there. So we need to have a target on the wall, something that we need to aim at. Otherwise, we're just doing things just to justify that we're actually UXers and we have something to do. So we were able to actually, within these 3 weeks, detach and look at the big picture as to, okay, where we are, what is happening around us, and what are the needs of that organization. Another major decision, that's why it's bolded here, is that we decided to run the department as a business, right? And what that means is practically, up until that point, we were actually practically saying, please, could we help you, right? We were practically selling what we could do for free, right? The thing is that when people know that there's nothing of value that comes for free, not only in business, but generally in life, right? So when you say practically that this is all the value that I can bring to you and I can do it for free, then of course people are like, do I really want that? I mean, how can it be for free if it's so valuable? So what that meant is by running it as a business, now we do have requirements for our participation. We don't go and say, please let us help. What we go and say is, we can help, but we also need this, this, and that to be in place for us to be able to provide the return on investment that we can, because everything has to do with return on investment. And of course, we needed to design our vision, right? Now, user experience as we saw it is not a product, but it is a service. So because it is a service, we need to design our service offering end to end, just like we would do if we were actually selling that to a consumer or a customer. So we did all that for 3 weeks, and the year now is 2019. The state, the context that we're in is that we have varying levels of executive buy-in. We have executives that actually get it a lot and they buy into it, some of them actually too much, and others that a little less. And of course, that depends on the engagement that we have had with them throughout these years. We have, again, product teams with varying degrees of understanding of as to how user experience is, which also makes sense. There is a much higher demand for our work now, and we get a few more resources. But we actually step into another problem. And that problem is that within the enterprise, we have around 600 different applications, and we are in total 7 designers. That's it. Now, however you do the math, it doesn't add up. You cannot do that, no matter who you are. So we had to come up with a way to actually tackle that and try to assist as many people, as many product teams as possible to have as many usable systems as possible out there. Now, the challenges with having such low capacity based on the demand is that we needed to focus on a very small number of products. That's called prioritization, right? So a very small number of products with highest return on investment. That is a solid strategy. But at the same time, that means that there are areas of other areas of the portfolio with much inferior user experience. There are a lot of missed opportunities where we can see things that we could potentially, like low-hanging fruits that we could potentially fix to make our people, make our colleagues more efficient and more productive, but we just didn't have the capacity to do that. And of course, the inferior UX in other areas of the portfolio is what I call problem displacement. It's not like we, because of ignoring them, because we cannot actually tackle them, that we won't have to do that in the future. So we're just displacing the problem for later on, like practically hide under the rug, simply because there's nothing else that we can do. Very importantly, another challenge that we want to tackle in this workshop, because this whole thing was during a workshop, is that leadership decisions affect user experience. Like I'm sometimes I get tired when people ask me about that, or when I hear or I read things online where they say, okay, we do what we do, and then you come in with your user experience and you do your job. That's not how it works, right? User experience is everybody's responsibility. And leadership decisions on the highest level could affect every single product underneath, right? An example that I often actually use is that user experience is not the salt you put on your steak to make it taste better. It is the protein within the steak. There is going to be an experience whether we are involved or not. That's just the way it works, right? Everything, whenever you interact with something in your environment, that is, and you get an experience out of it. That's how the human works. So what we are to do is to ensure that that experience is positive. That's it. Well, it sounds simple. I guarantee you it's not. For those of you who are not actually UX designers, if there's anybody like that out there, it is not an easy job to do. So the last one that we would really like to tackle at this stage is what we were doing up until now is trying to disrupt the status quo from the outside in. What does that mean? That in 2015 or end of 2015, the UX department was very, very new. That means that I and my other colleagues were very, very new in an environment, in an engineering environment where people have been working together for 5, 10, 20 years, right? And the user centricity or user experience was not a thing. It wasn't something that people were thinking about. So imagine a junior like me coming in, like being branded as we're going to bring a change in, and trying to change product teams that have been working in a specific way for many years as a team, as a group, because Lego is a family internally, right? So going into a family and saying to people practically, not in these words, but practically telling people, you have been doing the past 10 years, you have to change that now and do it in a different way. You have to change your mindset and potentially the way you work, because practically that's what it is. User experience is change, right? That's what it is. So imagine trying to do that as an outsider. It's practically a marketing problem that we're trying to solve, right? Word of mouth is a more efficient and effective way to market something. But we didn't have that because we don't have the word of mouth, because you tend to trust people that you know, and they didn't know us. So we sit down, we have a workshop, and we identify 4 how might we's as to that we actually want to tackle. So how might we leverage the executive support that we have in a more impactful way? How might we ensure user experience is not an afterthought when decisions are made on leadership level? How might we support as many different product teams as possible at satisfactory level? And how might we increase the user-centric mindset organically and from within? I'd like to make a pause here. Panayoti, do you still hear me? Is everything okay?
Fine.
Okay, cool. Thanks. All right. So these are the 4 how might we's that we wanted to tackle. And the solution for that is what we call the UX sandwich. It's the bottom-up and top-down approach that we wanted to tackle. The top-down approach we call the UX partnership, and the bottom-up is the UX academy. And in between this sandwich that you see there, you can see that there is design thinking, there is agile development, there is digital transformation, and there is all the products that we have. All these things are happening at the same time, and we try to actually squeeze them all together in an all-encompassing UX concept. And it's a very unique concept in its concept and its implementation. So let's go take a look at what that is actually. So the partnership specifically, that's the top-down approach, and it's meant to actually tackle the first 2. How might we leverage the executive support that we have in a more impactful way, and how might we ensure that user experience is not an afterthought when decisions are made on leadership level. So what is it? So practically the partnership is one UX designer from the UX department assumes the role of the UX partner in one of the streams within IT or business technology, partnering with the director of that stream on a leadership level. Let me give you an example because that is a mouthful. I'm a UX designer in the UX department, right? I assume the role, the design leadership role in what is called here manufacturing and supply chain. So practically, I'm responsible for the user experience of all the applications and products within manufacturing supply chain for the whole of the Lego group. And I sit on a leadership level with the VP, the vice president of that whole area. That is manufacturing supply chain technology, right? That's what I do currently for the past 2.5 years. So what are some of the responsibilities and the mission of a partner? So obviously, you need to know, just like every other UX work, you start by trying to understand the domain, right? Of course, added to that is not only understanding the domain of this huge area, but also the strategy that is already in place. User experience vision setting, that is something that as a partner you need to do. Stream-wide guidelines and direction generally about our products, best practices, et cetera. We are helping actually set up meaningful value measures. And as I mentioned before, I'm probably going to get into that a bit more, how important value measures are. That is what we're aiming at, what success looks like, right? And of course, practical UX work. That's self-explanatory, but let's take a look at one of each, like a couple of examples from each. Domain knowledge, let's see what that meant for me, for my case. So that's a picture of, that you can also find online on Google. Actually, that is a picture of one of the factories that we have. And the machines that you see actually in this picture are molding machines. These are the machines that actually make the bricks. So that's practically what manufacturing is, or part of manufacturing. So of course, I needed to gain domain knowledge, so understand how each one of these machines actually work, which is a very exciting domain, the whole thing. It's very nerdy in the best possible way. So we have 5 factories around the world, 3 different continents. These 5 factories have 5 different working cultures. And of course, we have our users span from data analysts, so white collar workers, to hourly workers or seasonal workers that are paid by the hour, for example, right? So it's a huge span of what these users are and some of the attributes and goals that they have and tasks that they have to perform. And of course, there is an Industry 4.0 journey. I'm not going to get into that. Industry 4.0 is practically the 4th industrial revolution that we're actually undergoing for the past 2 years, and what that means for manufacturing and supply chain. So all these things are things that I need to learn as fast as possible. UX vision setting, I wanted to start with something very, very simple, because one of the things that we tend to do as UX designers, unfortunately, is when we present our work, we think that we present it to other designers that understand what we're talking about, or how great doing design is, right? We need to sell it from the other person's perspective. That's why sometimes we fail to actually sell what we need to sell. So short-term vision, I wanted something very, very simple. I actually started saying we need to start monitoring, measuring, and then based on these measurements, make changes to the products that we already have. And the long-term vision was something, again, very simple, something that could be communicated and everybody could understand, is to raise the level of usability and experience for all our products. These were the two things that came out during the first week that I assumed the role of the UX partner. Stream-wide guidelines and direction, again, just a couple of examples. We wanted something lightweight, something that doesn't actually take too much time out of the end users when they actually fill it out. So we went with the system usability scale score. And we wanted to have it as an informal KPI or key performance indicator for all our products, right? And of course, the goal should be that we get a SAS score of above 68. So that was one. And the other one, just again, an example is vendor selection requirements. Very important, simply because nowadays with the software as a service or off-the-shelf software, either on premise or on the cloud or in the cloud, we need UXers to actually get into that process when the organization or your company actually tries to choose all these things, right? To choose the software, simply because if that software has a very low base usability and it's not easily configurable, that means that for many, many years, potentially, you're stuck with a solution that is not usable enough. And there's nothing you can do about it. So why lock ourselves into something like that? Instead, we get UX designers in during the tender process, during the vendor selection, to actually evaluate on a high level the solutions and provide a recommendation, of course. Help set up meaningful value measures, very, very important. So according to the short-term vision that I actually explained, so we try to help teams come up with value measures, with outcomes, value measures that are tied to outcomes, not output. That is a major change that the whole industry is trying to undergo. That's why you hear a lot about OKRs and things like that. But we need to start from the beginning. What is an outcome? And what is the difference between outcome and output? Building an application is not outcome. It is output, right? Outcome is what we're trying to achieve with that application. The fact that somebody built and shipped something out, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily successful. Did you provide value? Did this product provide value? Did we achieve the business goals that we had? Just shipping something out doesn't mean anything. Well, it does mean, but up to a point. That's output. We need to figure out what the outcome is. So we facilitating design thinking workshops that we actually configured from a standard design sprint into, let's say, a half-a-day workshop where we can figure out a vision and value measures to put into the product canvases that we are actually help the product teams prepare, right? So, and of course, we are asking for product teams to come up, for products to actually come up with product canvases, because it forces the discussion of what is value and what is the vision. What are we aiming at? Back to what are we trying to achieve? Very important question. So, practical work, I'm not going to be able to, actually, I'm not going to go through that. This is some of the work that I did the moment I actually became a partner. It was a major return on investment product that I was working in. And that was about replacing the production monitoring system that we have. It's actually practically controls all the machines in all the factories that we have and surrounded equipment, right? So it was quite a lot of work. I'm not going to get into that. That's just an example of a journey map that you see there, and the different upsides and downsides, frustrations, pain points, opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, some other things that we actually went through: ideation. There was a low fidelity prototyping and simulations. And by simulation, what I mean is taking something, because we're talking about factories, right? The core task that people have to achieve is mainly physical tasks. That goes back to saying that we're not building applications for engagement, right? Technology in the factory is supplementary. It's not meant to be something that draws attention. It's there for when it is needed. And that's it. That's why it makes it even more specialized. That enterprise UX, something way more specialized because of that, right? And it's of course less fancy. I'll have to say that too. So simulations are practically taking things on ourselves, like doing paper prototyping or physical prototypes, creating physical prototypes to see the ergonomics, for example, or how this would work in a physical process, human factors, practically. So user testing, of course, when we increase the fidelity in user testing, and then a high fidelity prototype, et cetera, et cetera. Some other new responsibilities that have come up after 2 years already, we're talking about design operations or design ops, as they're called, because we're scaling up. We have more designers now, and we need to figure out how we could provide the maximum amount of impact and make design more efficient and effective. We're also in the process of hiring more UXs. And of course, we need to take care of the cross-product fit. So because we have a helicopter view where we sit, we can see whether that product that we're actually building or something that is coming up through the pipeline or something that is requested is going to fit with the whole landscape that we have. Because enterprise is about landscape, it's an ecosystem. So does it fit in? If it doesn't, then we need to have that discussion. So there's quite a lot more initiatives. For example, there's an initiative to actually train product owners because now we're working in agile ways, right? And our mindset is way more agile now, which was a major success and a lot of work that people had to do. But product owners, we need to train them in terms of the UX mindset. Some of them have it already, some of them don't, and we need to help them, right? To help them understand why this is so important. So what we have learned so far. Strategic work, because I was talking that we're actually sitting on a leadership level, is a major, major responsibility. So you need to really, really mature as a designer and as a person really, really fast, right? You need to try to let your ego out because as designers, I think at least I'm talking about myself, my ego was about higher than it should be, but I had to lower it substantially to be able to be diplomatic and be able to actually achieve what I needed to achieve for manufacturing supply chain. So need to really, really, really do that quite fast and grow up. So you need to focus more on strategic work and not practical work back at the beginning of this, because I took this responsibility quite early in my career. And of course, I didn't want to give up the practical work. I still haven't, of course. But I figured out that I cannot do both the strategic work and the practical UX work on the same high level that I wanted to. It's just impossible. There's not enough time. So one of these two will have to be left behind a bit. And of course, I couldn't do that, so I had to adjust. You need to develop a thick skin because right now as a UX designer, you may have, let's say, to deal with or to discuss and to create your argumentation with, when you're talking with product owners, developers, et cetera, when you are a UX partner, you have to deal with vice presidents, you have to deal with senior managers, right? It's a completely different ball game where people have the agenda that they have based on the role, and you have to go in and convince them in actually investing in user experience, which is the way it should be, right? Nobody take anything with a blank check, right? It's part of the job. So develop thick skin, very important. Develop leadership skills, right? Leadership skills are something that is taught, right? It's not necessarily that you're born, like natural born leader, fine, whatever, but you can actually learn how to be a good leader. That means taking an interest in people's lives and people in the work life, try to support the people that work with you or for you in any way possible and give them everything that they need to do their best work, right? It's not just about KPIs and just about these key indicators, etc. It's about people. So you need to train, and I had to do quite a lot of reading about that. So another thing is that leadership, when you actually assume this role, there's not one time that you can actually say that this is not my job, I'm not doing that, right? At least the way I see it, be the solution, do not be the problem. Do not be one more person that goes to a manager's office and complains about something, about that they're lacking something, time, or oh, they don't understand or something like that. Be the solution. Don't be one more person that brings problems to people, right? Or just brings problems out and speaks out, right? That doesn't do anything. And that way you will be irreplaceable, right? We are what the company and the organization needs us to be. We don't just push pixels. We don't just do UX research. We are what we need to be to support the organization. That's it. So we do way more than that. Change management is one of them, for example. Helping with the agile transformation is another one, right? Helping product owners actually inform the scope for the MVP or user stories, right? So you have to be more. Well, you don't have to, but I would highly recommend it. So achievements. All our products have a SAS score right now, so they have been evaluated in that way, so we know where they stand. And it is used as a KPI and pushing for more, for the SAS score to be more than that. So user-centric design and development maturity. This is a standard scale for organizational maturity, a standard model. For example, when we started 2.5 years ago, we were in the interested level, just like most organizations out there. We're interested, but let's see how it works, which again makes sense. And 2.5 years later, we are in the committed and we're growing. We're going up into that scale very, very fast, right? We have very actively involved executives. We are actually hiring a lot of UXers, and we will hire more. And practically every product team, there is UX work done in them, and we're going to see why and how we actually managed to cover all that ground. And user testing and the feedback is actually incorporated into every sprint. That is something that is very key, right? That's something that we're trying to do 100% of the time. We're not there yet, right? It's very hard to do that. But feedback from one sprint should go into the backlog to be considered for the next sprint or the sprint after that. So there is a continuity for all that. That means that each sprint, there should be some kind of testing being done. That means that there should be some kind of value towards the end user into every sprint. So we're not there 100%, but we and our product teams, we're making great efforts into actually getting there. But it is a transformation. It is a journey that we're undergoing now. So that was the top down. And if you allow me to take a sip, we'll go to the bottom up, which is called the UX Academy. And we're going to see what the UX Academy is. And of course, it is to address the last two how might we's that we have. How might we support as many different product teams as possible on a good level? And of course, how might we increase that mindset from within, right? Word of mouth from people who trust, or from within the product teams themselves. So how did we actually achieve that? So the Academy, we're going to start with a definition of what it actually is. So we go into the different product teams and we identify people that, of course, are not designers from these different product teams, and we give them the tools and knowledge to carry out day-to-day UX activities and spread the user-centric and UX mindset within these product teams. That means I train a developer, either a senior engineer or a junior engineer, doesn't matter, or a scrum master or a product owner or a consultant, right? We teach them methodologies and tools. We teach them UX. We teach them to do it practically, or some of it, of course, right? So they can also spread that mindset within these teams. It's no longer a stranger like me going into product team and preaching change. It is the developer next to you that is also a developer that actually comes to you and says, look, this we could think of that problem also like that, right? Try to think of that in another way. So that was, of course, easier said than done. Let's see how we actually did it. We had actually 4 different things that we need to consider. Of course, let's say that we identify these people. We need to ensure that they have time to do the work, to read about UX, to study, participate in the sessions. So that was one. Find them, of course, then decide on what to teach them and how, right? So for the first one, we actually ensured that these people have 20% of their total time, total work hours, dedicated to UX work and UX training. 20%, that is practically 1 day a week that they can actually clear out so they can do only UX work, no matter who they are. If they actually participate, they have that. We need to find them, and let's see how we actually did that. That wasn't easy, but we went into these product teams. We had, of course, a discussion with the product owner and the product manager, et cetera, before we actually go in and say, okay, you come here, I need to talk to you. That's not how it actually happened. So we had handpicked some individuals that we either could have had like prior engagement with, or we have heard how they think about that. And we say, okay, let's have a discussion. Now, these people that we have had so far, it's either junior to senior developers, product owners, scrum masters, IT consultants. We have had practically every single job title out there in the academy, training them in terms of user experience. So we had one-to-one discussion about their vision. That has to do with how HR works in general. The way we do it is we're not going ahead and say, okay, tell me what you think about user experience. That's not what we're asking them. What we ask them is, what we care more about is how ambitious they are about their career, how they see their job, and how passionate they are. Because if you're inside a product, any kind of product, right, that somebody has to use, and you're ambitious, you want to have the best career possible, you have to be interested in user experience, no matter what you do inside a product. You need to have at least some kind of knowledge, some kind of understanding as to how human beings work, who you're designing for, right? And you can only do that if you're ambitious. If you're not a person who is just there 9 to 5, get the money, go home, right? So we needed to understand who they are and what they need to do, what they want to do for themselves. And then we would go into a discussion about user experience and how they see that. Of course, the important thing is for that to be voluntary. Nobody had to do it. They had to take it themselves after we provide all the information so they can make an informed decision. This is a lot of work. You're going to have to go back to school practically, right? You're going to have to do exercises and assignments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we were very upfront about that. And then we had to determine who is actually going to actually work in that. Decide on the curriculum. How we did that, we wanted to actually do it very organically, so not what comes into mind. So we had a workshop where we identified the most common UX issues that we see all across the IT organization. We sat down, we created an affinity diagram, right? A standard workshop affinity diagram. We created these different, of course, patterns, these different groups. And we said, okay, in order to actually solve these problems, we need to teach them that. So what we actually teach them is quite a lot of things, actually. How to do desk research, how to do interviews, observations, how to analyze that data, either via affinity diagrams, mental model diagrams, or flow diagrams, or user journey maps, et cetera, et cetera. In the ideate phase, let's say if we split into these 4 phases of user-centered design, we had different ideation techniques, storyboarding, sketching, and wireframing. And then in evaluation, heuristic evaluation and usability testing, which are the 2 most important ones. And then in delivery, how to pitch the work. And I have to stay on this for a second, right? I've been involved in a lot of hiring processes, hiring a lot of UXs, et cetera, et cetera. One of the most important things that I think is lacking from education, right? From UX education or product design education is, how do we sell our job? how do we sell our value, right? How do we sell that? You have to learn how to sell it from the other person's perspective, just like a salesperson would, right? It's not about designers selling to designers. You very rarely are going to do that, right? You're selling to people who are not designers. They don't understand jargon. They don't understand that this user research that you did is amazing, even though it might be, right? That might be the case, but they don't care about that, and they shouldn't. So how do we sell that work? And again, how do we measure the impact that we have and continuously improve on that? So the methodology is a combination of face-to-face and online, also due to COVID now. It is practically a mini semester that lasts 5 to 6 months. It's 25 sprints, right? That consists of classroom training and a lot of practical work within that classroom session, let's say. There is mentoring halfway through, where the ambassador check in with their mentor to get feedback on their progress and make the necessary changes. And then they submit that at the end of the sprint. So it is a 2-week sprint for each of these methodologies. So as I mentioned that, and this is a feedback from one of the ambassadors that we have. That specific person is a Scrum Master. He said that my most valuable learning is without any doubt that my end users interviewed are very willing to talk about their everyday work, which is, well, anyway, what tools they're using on and offline, their process, which helps us tremendously in a new design. The quieter I was, the more they were sharing, which is one of the techniques that we teach during interviewing, that just stay silent. People will be forced, right, to talk if you stay silent. To break this uncomfortable silence, they will try to break it by saying more and more and more. Of course, don't take it to the other end, right, because it gets very frustrating. So that's just as a side note. So examples from the classroom session, that's specifically for interviews. We start by saying hello, of course, because we're kind people. And we have some reflections from the last sprint, and then we start the actual training session. What are interviews? What do we use them for? How do we do them? Tips and tricks, how to write an interview script, very important. Good and bad types of questions, of course. How to not ask a biased question, right? Isn't this great? Is a biased question. How do you like this? Is a biased question. We don't ask these questions. And of course, the assignment is at the end, and this is an example of an assignment. So carefully recruit 3 to 5 people that fit your target audience, of course. Interview each one of them for 20, 30 minutes, and then into a one-to-one session. And then, of course, upload your learnings, reflections, and your results online, so we can actually take a look at them. So what we have learned from the first iteration that we ran, because right now we just finished the second 6-month academy. We included from the first one to the second one, and we're going to include even more in the third one, a lot more hands-on elements in classroom teaching. So it's not boring, or at least I remember some of the subject that I was taught at the university, they could be a lot more interactive than they were. So ensure that 20% of that time that we actually cleared for them with a very good, great managers, that we're actually able to give that to us because it was absolutely necessary, that this reflects into the Jira board or TFS or whatever they're using, Trello boards or something. It needs to be reflected in their calendar, in the backlog of whatever tool they're actually using. Simply because everybody in the product team, they need to know what these people are doing. They need to know that, no, you cannot book me for something on that day. I have UX work to do. And of course, some tools and disciplines are much easier to grasp and integrate than others. And the way at least we see user experiences, we see it as a holistic concept, let's say. So in our heads, at least, if you don't know at least the basics of information architecture, you cannot be as effective a UX designer, right? So it's not just about the research, it's about information architecture. It's about a lot more things than, let's say, because I hear some people say that we do art, user experience. I don't want to get into that, but user experience is not art, right? So again, we do what is necessary to have the best, to provide the best products that we can for our colleagues. That means expanding our skill sets as much as possible, even though information architecture specifically, it's its own field. That's how big it is. But at least the basics you need to know as a UX designer. So what we have achieved, we tripled the amount of products that have some kind of UX design being done in them. We increased the average SAS score by more than 10 points, and that's quite a lot. And we more than doubled the amount of participants from the first iteration of the Academy to the second one that we just finished. And we are in the process of taking more people in. For the second point that I mentioned is the average SAS score. This is an actual example. Of course, we're not mentioning what products these are, but you can see product one here. You can see product one and product two, the usability percentile before a UX ambassador was embedded in them and after, right? It's day and night, the usability of the product with just an ambassador. So very, very important things as well is that ambassadors, that's very, very important. At least for me, I think it's extremely important that these ambassadors are homegrown, right? They adhere to a level of quality and work ethic and everything that we need, right? It's not necessarily something that we bring from the outside that, okay, this is what we can do. We are training them to provide quality work or the quality that we need for methods to be used and be applied the way we need them to be applied, right? The way it makes sense for us. So very important. User experience is part of the product vision. Now, if you remember in the beginning, as a partner, I came out with a UX vision. That's not the way it's supposed to be done, right? User experience is part of the product, as I mentioned. So there shouldn't be a product vision and a UX vision as two separate things, like two parallel streams. No, right? Product is experience, right? So one vision that includes everything. So there's a lot of proactive involvement in terms of setting the vision for our products and the value measures. So people actually call us and say, could you please help us come up with a vision and value measures, which is an amazing thing to do and to see how the mindset actually has changed over the years. There's a significant increase in questions about user experience for people we don't necessarily engage with because we still cannot cover everybody. It's just a huge area. So they come to us, they ask a lot of questions. They come to us actually by themselves and say, look, we're thinking of actually changing that. This is the business problem that we're trying to solve, but we think that we should try with researching it first, which is an amazing thing. I get very happy when people actually say that by themselves, say, yes, that's absolutely right. And whatever my capacity is, I'm going to help you as best as possible. That's it. And of course, most amazingly, 3 of these people that are not UX designers, they went from attending the academy to making a lateral career move and becoming full-time UX designers. So they were IT consultants or Scrum Masters, et cetera, et cetera. They have now turned into full-time UX designers. And there are a lot more coming. So this is a trend that is going to keep going as there's more demand and people actually get to learn what user experience is and get very interested in it. So takeaways, because I've been talking for quite a lot. So if you don't want to miss out on leveraging that executive support that you have in a better way and increasing the user-centric mindset organically and ensure that user experience is not an afterthought when decisions are made on leadership level and supporting as many product teams as possible, then take a bite out of this. Well, we certainly took a bite and we keep taking that bite. It's quite a big sandwich and we're quite hungry. So we're going to keep biting this. And yeah, that's it from my side. One last thing that I would like to mention is because this thing, we have been actually presenting that to other companies because everything that I actually presented is not about Lego. We're actually collaborating with a lot of top 100, top 500 companies and with their UX departments, et cetera, collaborate a lot, and we exchange ideas. We want, and we are very willing to help anybody out there from you people that are actually listening to this. If you want to learn more, if you want to get more practical information, reach out. If you want to do, let's say, a presentation of this to your stakeholders or your leaders or whatever, what we care about is for enterprise user experience or any kind of user experience to move the field forward. It's not about personal things or nobody's statue is going to be built anywhere, right? We do this because we believe in user experience, we love what we do, and we would like to help anybody who wants to give this a try. So just reach out, that's it. And we're going to help as best as we can. So that is it. I've been talking quite a lot. So I will stop talking now. I cannot hear you, Panagiotis. Can everybody hear Panagiotis, but not me?
Now?
No, we don't.
Okay, I will hear you now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vasily. I think that was an insightful talk, and I can tell because it has already sparked many comments, questions.
Stop sharing. Sorry, Panagiotis. Can I stop sharing so I can actually look at people?
Yes, of course.
All right.
I would suggest a very, very short break.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, because I think that you need it, and I need it because I want to check a little bit and sort out some of the questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
We will try to cover them as much as we can. So please be back in 5 minutes. Okay.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good. Indeed, that's great, but that's even better. But that's not a requirement from my side. Yep.
Cool. Let me go back to the issue of specific instruments that you used.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, you told us that you used system usability scales. System usability scale.
Yes.
How did you decide to use this scale, and how did you end up with a minimum of 68 as a score?
Okay. Well, system usability scale, the reason why we chose that, it's very practical. It's because we don't want to use a survey that takes too long to fill out. We wanted to use a survey that is an industry standard, and the system usability scale score has been an industry standard for more than 30 years. It has been validated hundreds of times by research. And of course, when there is something like that out there, why come up with your own that is not validated, et cetera, et cetera. And the other reason is, of course, that it takes around 2.5 minutes on average to fill that out. It's 10 multiple choice questions that come up to an actual score that needs to be, of course, calculated. And the 68 part is because the industry average, let's say, is 68. 68 in very cheap terms means that the usability of that system is okay. It's not great, it's not even good, but it's definitely not bad, right? Anything above 68, it's like a scale, right? Anything above 68, it's great, right? But if it is below 68, then that is a problem. So we needed a very lightweight, fast way to evaluate as many products as possible. And we identify that because it actually covers all the requirements that we have and the constraints as well.
Do you use other scales?
Well, sometimes we use the NPS as a score, let's say, or as a kind of measure. And then we have other measures that go up to analytics, but that's more into user behavior and not something that is lightweight in terms of surveys. No, we have identified for now the SAS score to be the main thing that we validate in a lightweight, because again, the SAS score doesn't tell you what's wrong with it, just like any other kind of analytic, right? Any other kind of measurement, it just tells you what happens. It just doesn't tell you why it happens. And the SAS score just tells you what the usability is. It doesn't tell you where the problem is. That's why any kind of analytics or any kind of quantitative measure has to be supplemented with qualitative research to figure out what the problem is. So we don't just stick to the SAS score, but because we have to heavily prioritize, we prioritize all our products by the SAS score. If we have a product that is important and the SAS score is very, very low, then that's an indication for us to go in and take a closer look. That's one of the ways that we prioritize the products.
And let me move to the UX maturity issue,
Yep.
which is a big one. I mean, how actually did you measure the level of UX maturity? And Sophia asks, is there any tool for this?
Well, great questions. And again, the way that we actually measure it is by, well, we have created ourselves a questionnaire, a survey, because again, when we were coming up with that stuff, we didn't know if there is a survey that it has been validated, just like the SAS score, for example, and there isn't. Something that is as solid as the SAS score. There are other questionnaires out there, but we decided to go with one of our own for many, many reasons that I'm not going to go into that right now. But it is practically a survey that we send out to product teams that they fill in themselves. And then we have a before and after picture, let's say, and we measure that. We started by doing that every year. So now we also measured every 6 months or something like that. But again, yes, I will admit that it's not a validated survey. I don't know if there is one, but the one that we're using, and again, this is for internal consumption. It's not something that we are advocating for, or that we're actually preaching for other people to use. It's something that works for us, and it is also lightweight, just like the SAS score.
Nice, thank you. Dionysus asks, and to be honest, that was an idea of mine as well. Do you conduct any field studies? I mean, we have talked a lot, so much focus on product evaluations, usability testings.
Yep.
What about any field study?
We do mainly, and of course that depends on the context, and that's one of the main, like the heavy hitters in terms of the difference between consumer-facing UX and enterprise UX is the context, right? Especially for me, that I work in manufacturing supply chain, most of the user research that I've done is with observations, field studies, most of them. We have to, because again, the process is, the core tasks are physical, right? So most of the research that we do is shadowing. That is, I have actually run more shadowing sessions or contextual inquiries, for example, more times that I have run usability tests. That's how often we actually do it. And we're very lucky that right across the campus here, we have one of the 5 factories, for example, which is in Denmark, that I can actually go across the street. And I have full access everywhere. So I can actually go there, and people, of course, are always welcome. They say, yes, please go ahead. So I mount up a GoPro and I just go, and then analysis, et cetera, et cetera. But most of the research that we run is field research, at least in my area, in my partnership. That has that kind of context, yes.
Okay. Well, let me go to achievements as you presented them in KPIs, and how did these achievements actually can be linked to any business KPIs, or how can they affect costs and operations from a financial standpoint?
Oh, yes, that's a good one. Well, The thing is that the SAS score, for example, is not it's a KPI that is for the product team to learn, and it's easy for them to learn, etc., etc. But what we're measuring aside from that are very standard usability metrics that are relevant to what we do. For example, time to task completion is directly linked to usability, right? So of course we're measuring the before and after, and that's one way that we show value. And everything that we do in the enterprise, even though it may sound like, oh, but it's for your colleagues, it's not really for the consumers. If we save 1 minute from each person's, if we let's say shave out 1 minute from the waste that our colleagues have to go through every day, and we have in Lego around 19,000 colleagues, right? 1 minute from each person, just from that, right? We're talking about millions and millions of dollars every year. So everything we do can be directly connected to money. Everything it has to do with the bottom line, which is money, right? So less support, for example, less mistakes being conducted, especially in critical systems in production, where one simple mistake can actually shut down a whole factory. We're talking about billions in damage. So usable systems means less mistakes, means less training, means less support, means lower time to task completion, which is one of the main ones that we have for productivity, for example. So, yeah.
Let me move to another topic. Asks, and I like that, about content design, UX writing. Who writes the content? How important is text in providing access to understanding?
So who writes the content? We do. We write the content. Of course, as I said, there's quite a lot of different things that we have to do that is not necessarily or is not considered UX design job description. One of them is, of course, information architecture, and not only on a basic level, but on quite a deep level. And UX writing is one of the things that some of us have some training with, others not, but of course we collaborate between each other and we can actually do that. For example, my main thing is I'm more into psychology and behavior psychology and things like that, and information architecture. So I help people who do not have the skill sets. And UX writing, we have a colleague that actually is pretty good. So whenever I'm stuck somewhere that I cannot do myself, that's not very often. I mean, that's a good thing. But I go to him because whoever claims that they know everything, that just doesn't exist. So yeah, it's a constant learning opportunity for everybody, every day. If you want to learn something new in the enterprise, you can do that. There's so much space. So yeah.
How much time, George asks, how much time do UX Academy people need to allocate for ambassadors training?
So how much time we need to allocate to train people, or the actual ambassadors, how much time out of their regular schedule they take? They take up to 20%. That is 1 day a week. From our side, it is, I mean, for the academy, for what we actually teach, all the material, because it's not like we're not like journalists. We don't just walk up to people and start talking to them about interviews, right? This requires a lot of preparation. So we're talking about more than 1,500 work hours that we have spent to build all that content, to build all the exercises, the systems, the maintenance, etc., etc. And a lot of that is out of our own time, right? Because we're doing on top. This is a full-time job, but we're doing it on top of everything else that we have to do. So that's how we manage, let's say.
And let me ask this one. Philippos asks, During your early steps leading the company towards UX maturity, you mentioned that you ran a lot of stakeholder workshops. But what are the biggest obstacles regarding the planning and implementation of these workshops, and what held you back?
Yeah, well, we didn't run stakeholder workshops in the beginning. The workshops that I mentioned were workshops that we ran in our department as designers. Now, we have run some workshops in the beginning, but not a lot, simply because running a workshop, and I'm not talking specifically about a design sprint, right? A design studio, it could be that it's much shorter, etc. So it requires a lot of people to be involved, and it requires justification for taking that amount of time out of people's calendars. Everything we do in the enterprise, every single thing you do, you need to have a business justification for it, and you need to be able to back it up, right? I've been doing this work for a while now. I haven't been able to walk into a room and say, we're going to do this that way because I'm an expert and I know what I'm talking about. Never, not once. Even I, that I'm the lead, let's say the UX lead for that manufacturing area, the whole area, right? Not once. You go into a room and you need to be prepared. You need to have all the data that you require, because every design decision has a business effect, every single one. So you need to rely on knowledge or something to base something on. It's not because you're an expert, people need to do things for you, or that you actually say or you tell them to do. Not a chance. Not one. And I haven't even tried it, right? To be honest. It just doesn't seem like a challenge. I don't know. And that's not what UX is about. UX has the upper hand in terms of purely logical arguments, simply because we need to be based in data, in a solid foundation of understanding and proof, right? That's why we have the upper hand, let's say, in terms of in a logical argument. We do not base on gut feelings or something like that. We need to come with the data to say, that's why I'm saying what I'm saying. That's it.
And well, actually, we could be talking for hours because
yes,
I think that time's up. But let's have one more question, please.
Sure.
Okay. Just a minute, please. Dimitris asks, how do you make sure that the UX Academy alumni will not do biased research, gather bad data, and thus make crappy product decisions? That's a good one.
Yeah. Yes, that's a very straightforward one. We cannot guarantee that 100%. We can't, right? So we are there after the ambassadors graduate. We're there to support them, et cetera, and give them guidance. And we're there to actually check the scripts that they have. But that happens up to a point in the beginning. When we see that they got it, or they have, let's say, 90% of it, because these people are not UX designers, right? UX design is a master's level skill set. Nobody can claim that in 6 months these people became UX designers. That cannot happen. So what we do is that we follow through with them. We tell them, again, leadership, right? Come up with a plan and let's look at it together. I'm not going to do this for you. You will do it, you will do the work, and then we're going to review it together and maybe make changes if we need to. And based on that, for the first few months, the first few times, the first few projects or initiatives, we do it like that. But later on, we cannot be there for everybody forever, let's say in quotes, simply because we become the bottleneck then, because we have so many ambassadors that there's just not enough time to do that. So we rely on their progress and where they are. That's just how it has to be.
Thank you, Vasily. And I really like what you said about, the 6-month period. I mean, there are many UX bootcamps out there that, and the main promise of them is that you know, they're going to make you into a UX designer or UX assessor within 3 or 6 months. So thank you very much for mentioning that.
And again, just to clarify, these are absolutely necessary, all of them. For example, the people who became, for example, made the lateral move in their career to become UX designers, we tell them to go out and take an industry certificate, let's say, right? Industry certificates, they provide the foundation. After that, it's up to you to read and gain experience, etc., etc. Again, everything we do can be taught. Every single thing you can learn by yourself. You don't need to attend school necessarily or something, but it will take time. That's it. It's up to you how fast you learn. There is a mountain to climb, right? And however fast you go, you may take a helicopter to go up to the top, but you have to climb it, and you will do that. So that's it. I have nothing against those things. Just specifically for the academy, the way it is, it's simply not to make UX designers. It is to provide the day-to-day tools to do day-to-day UX activities and the mindset. That's it. After that, of course, you can become a UX designer. Sure.
Well, I think that we should conclude this insightful talk at this point. Once again, Vasily, thank you so much about this talk. I mean, I'm sure that it was very insightful and interesting and helpful for all of us. And believe me, I can tell that because I gathered a lot of comments and questions, and at least we tried to answer most of them. But again, this is a nice opportunity, I mean, to gather and have a talk, but we cannot have, you know, a discussion for hours and try to cover all the possible questions that you may have. But please keep your appetite like this, and I would love to thank you all for being here tonight, and we will see you in the next one. So huge thanks to all of you, especially to the newcomers. Thank you very much. And Vasily, once again, thank you so much. And I hope that we will have the chance to meet in person. And why not when the whole situation with the COVID and the pandemic ends, maybe we could have you in a face-to-face mode and give another talk within the auspices of Athens UX community. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. And again, if anybody wants to ask something or wants to have a discussion, please reach out. And of course, next time that I'm in Greece, you're all invited to Piraeus, so we can have some beers and talk about it.
Okay, okay. Nice. Thank you very much.
Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.